Welcome back to the PHP Essential Training Series, and in this tutorial we're going to be talking about using arrays in PHP. So what exactly is an array? Arrays are complex variables that store multiple values, and you're going to see as we go through the demonstrations that arrays, one, they're very, very popular. They're used in almost all programming languages. In fact, I don't know a language that doesn't use arrays. And the advantage to arrays is we can, for instance, have a user and designate the user by his user ID name and store all the information in that user in that particular one array. Because it can store multiple values and variables, and because of the way that we can set the arrays up, everything pertaining to that one user can be stored in an individual array. Arrays store groups of values under a single name, and there's three different types of arrays. We have indexed arrays, which use numeric keys. We have associative arrays, which each key has a specific value. And we also have multidimensional arrays, where an array contains arrays itself. So I'll have one array that contains other arrays, and those are called multidimensional arrays. All three of these we're going to demonstrate in the exercise as we walk through it, so don't be alarmed if you don't understand how they work, because we're going to demonstrate all of them. Index arrays. An indexed, or sometimes known as a numeric array, stores each array element with the numeric index. During the exercises, we'll demonstrate numerous indexed arrays and how the values are accessed, how we actually get those values from indexed arrays. Indexed arrays are probably the most popular arrays because that's what's created by default by the programming language. When it actually generates an array, if we don't go in and do anything with the keys, it actually generates an indexed array. The next are associative arrays. An associative array has a key assigned to values in an arbitrary or a user-defined way. Normally the keys in an associative array will have some meaning based on the value that it's actually referring to. And you'll see that as we go through the demonstration. When you set up keys in an associative array, normally you'll set them up having some kind of meaning to the value. For instance, I might set up a key that's first name, and then it would store the first name in the value. Last name would store the last name in the value. Email would store the email address in the value. And that's normally how we set up associative arrays, where the key itself has some kind of meaning to the value. Defined keys are used in place of numbers in the indexed array. As we set up these associative arrays, the key we're setting up actually replaces the index, the numeric index, from the indexed arrays. And then we have multidimensional arrays. In the multidimensional array, it's an array in which each element of the array can also be an array. In other words, we can have arrays that are containing arrays, and they can contain arrays inside that. We can go multiple levels deep. So I may have an array that contains an array that contains an array that contains an array. Not that unusual, especially if you get into complex programming. A good example is, I'm sure that most people that are going through this training have played video games. And that user video game, the user himself, as you generate that user in that video game, he may have a multi-dimensional array. In fact, I'm certain he has a multi-dimensional array that not only stores all his characteristics, there's another one that's going to store all his levels, there will be another one that stores all his inventory, there's going to be another one that stores profiles, and they may be leveled upon one another. There'll be another one that stores his place in the game. So multi-dimensional arrays are very, very popular in programming. A little bit complex to understand, but as we walk through the exercises, I think you'll get it, because I've got some good demonstrations on how all these work. And multidimensional arrays can become very complex. We'll demonstrate these during the exercise also, so don't be alarmed if you don't understand what I'm talking about, because we're going to go through all of this as we get into the exercises. So let's demonstrate what we talked about in the presentation. Let's get into our development environment and walk through these and demonstrate how arrays work in PHP. All right, so let's go ahead and drop out of our presentation, and I want to get into our development environment. Let's go make certain we've got our Apache server up and running, which we do. Excellent. Bring up Sublime Text 2, which will be my text editor for the demonstration. And I'm going to bring up my Google Chrome, loaded into my local host inside my arrays folder. So now we can actually work with the arrays themselves. And the first thing I want to do is let's go ahead and set up our first array. The first array I want to demonstrate is the indexed array. By the way, I've loaded my standard template. I did a save as arrays_1.php from that standard template. And the only thing I've changed is I've actually put the arrays in PHP indexed arrays title for my H2. As we've talked about in the past, I've got my standard CSS. which is just a basic generic CSS file for this particular template, just so we have something to look at inside of our browser window. And I've got this little area that's going to show me the values of the arrays that we're going to generate inside of our arrays_1.php file. So that's what we're starting with. Now the first thing we want to do is demonstrate an indexed array. All right, so in my first example, I'm going to create just a very, very standard array. I'm going to go ahead and open up our PHP tags, go down a couple lines and close that tag. This is going to be a very, very simple array. I'm just going to copy this from my text files, put this inside my PHP brackets, save those changes. When I go and actually look inside of my browser, you should see no difference because technically we've created the array, we've generated it, but we haven't done anything with it. So in order to actually see the values in the array, we actually have to use a built-in function in PHP, which I'm going to do right below there. I'm just going to type print r, print_r, and then in parentheses put in the name of the array I want to see. So I'm just going to put in my colors because that's the array we just generated. I'm going to end that with a semicolon and actually, save those changes, refresh our browser window. Now we should actually be able to see the array that we just generated and the indexes that were assigned to it. You'll notice I have array index 0 is red. That's my first value in the array. Index 1 is green. Index 2 is blue. And index 3 is yellow. A couple things I want you to notice. First off, that arrays are 0 based. They always start with the 0 index. That's the first thing I want you to be aware of with arrays. And because we didn't assign keys, when we generated the array, it actually assigned the key for us. Now we could actually assign the keys ourselves, and I'll show you that in the next demonstration. But in this particular demonstration, because we didn't make any key assignments, when we built the array, it automatically assigned the keys based on the order in which they were in between the parentheses as we created the array. All right, so let's look at another example of an index-based array. By the way, one thing I do want you to understand, these can store any type of data that we have inside of PHP. They can be string data, numeric data, Boolean, any values, any data types can be stored in arrays. Let's generate another array. I'm just going to come down and put a BR tag here. So I'm going to echo it back to our screen so that we have a break inside of our code. I'm going to come down right below that, generate another set of PHP tags. Now I could have actually done this in the same set, but I'm just trying to keep things separate so it's a little easier for you to understand. Another set of PHP tags, and I actually want to generate an array differently this time. So I'm actually going to generate a new array. I'm going to call this array colors. And this time I'm going to use the square braces. That's actually how we set up our key. And I'm going to start the square braces with 10. And I'm going to say equal red. So basically what I'm doing is I'm creating an array named colors, and I'm saying in your index value 10, I want you to put in red. And then I'm going to copy this. I'm just going to paste it in a bunch of times. I thought I copied it. I guess I didn't. Control C on the PC, Command C on the Mac, and then paste Control V on the PC, Command V on the Mac. And I'm just going to paste this in a few times. And I'm going to say, let's see, 10. Then I'm going to make index number 12. I'm going to make this one green. And again, we're still using, this is still index based, but now we're actually assigning the indexes. This is blue. Make 16. Let's make this one yellow. I'm going to make this one 18. And we're going to make this one black. And then I'm going to make this one 20. And I'm going to make this one white. And I'm going to save all those changes. And again, we've created this array. When I refresh my browser window, I'm not actually going to see anything there because I haven't done anything with that array yet. If I want to see it, let's go ahead and echo a couple of break statements. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that BR statement in between my quotation marks. We already know how the echo statement works. We've already covered that one. And then what I want to do is come down here, I'm going to say print R, just like we had done in the previous example. Print R inside parentheses, let's put in colors, because now we actually want to print, we want to be able to view the colors inside. And actually what I want to do in here, let's do this too. Let's echo our pre-tags. For anyone that's not aware, the pre-tags in HTML will format this as it would normally format, kind of like it was inside code. So right before and after that print R statement, I'm actually going to put in pre-tags, and you'll see with the difference when we display this on the screen. Let's go ahead and save those changes, refresh our browser window. Oh, we have a syntax error. I have forgotten, forgot my semicolon right there. Good example of what we can tend to forget inside of our PHP code. All right, and now you can see what the pre-tags did, but they actually they showed me what the index was and what the value is. The pre makes it a little bit easier to read because it actually is displaying the array the same way that we actually entered the array. But again, it's still index-based. The only difference here is we actually entered the indexes. What we're going to talk about next is let's talk about how we can actually access a particular value inside of our arrays. All right, so we've seen how we can generate these indexed arrays, how we can actually build them in our PHP code, but how do we actually pull a value from it? In other words, I don't want to print out the entire value of the array. I actually want one of the values that are inside one of those indexes. And in order to do that, let's go ahead and put in another set of PHP codes. Again, I could put this all inside the same PHP bracket or group, but I'm just adding these new PHP codes just to keep things a little more organized. I'm going to go ahead and put in a couple of break tags here just to give us some room. And again, because these are outside the PHP brackets, I don't need to use those echo functions or the echo constant inside of PHP. But anyway, if I wanted to pull a value from that colors array, what I would do, I'd say echo, and then I'd go to the name of the array, and then inside of square braces, I put the index of the value I'm trying to find. Let's say I wanted to pull the value yellow from that colors array. I know that's at index 16, so I put in 16, and that with a semicolon, save the changes. And if we go and look inside of our shell, you'll see that we actually have yellow. Oops, let's go take a couple of those out. It actually worked outside of my range. We actually have the value yellow, which is located in index number 16. If you look right there, you'll see index 16 is the value yellow, and that's what we're actually echoing to the screen, the value of yellow in the array index 16. So that's how we actually pull a value from an array. And we're going to demonstrate this more and more as we work through more of these arrays. I think the next one I want to look at is let's look at the associative array and how we set and use associative arrays in PHP. All right, so to do our associative array, the first thing I want to do, let's go ahead and clean up our template file. I'm going to go ahead and remove all the PHP code that we have in there currently. I'm going to do a save as. Let's go ahead and save this as arrays_2.php. This is where we're actually going to demonstrate those associative arrays. So I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes. I'm going to go back here, refresh. I'm going to load up arrays_2, and you'll know that we have arrays in PHP, and what I do want to do is change that index to associative. Save that change, refresh our browser window, and now we've got a new file set up just to demonstrate our associative arrays, which is exactly what we're going to do now. All right, so the first thing I want to demonstrate, let me demonstrate how we do a short syntax associative array, because there's a couple different ways that we can do associative arrays inside PHP. I'm going to just go ahead and put an H4 in here. I'm going to call this short syntax. Close out that H4 tag. And I'm only doing this so that we have it labeled in our window so it's easier for us to understand what we've just set up. So I got a short syntax associative array. And what I want to do, let's go ahead and create our PHP tags. So we know that we've got PHP inside these braces. Come down a few lines and close that tag out. So the first thing I'm going to do, let's go ahead and create the array. I'm just going to call this numbers. That'll be the name of my array, and it's going to be equal to, in square braces, let's just say in single quotes, and by the way, this could be double or single quotes. Make that a 1. And then let's do the same thing with 2. and then that's going to be equal to 2. Put in my comma, I'm going to have 3. Come outside the quotes, that's going to be equal to 3, comma, let's do 4. And that's going to be assigned a value of 4. And by the way, I could put spaces or not in here. I'm going to make sure my word wrap is turned on. And then I'm going to do one more. Let's do one more. I'm going to do 5. Outside my quotes, that's going to be equal to 5. Then I'm going to end that with a semicolon, just like we end all our statements. I'm just going to go and put these spaces in here. I don't really need them. I'm just going to put them in because to me it makes it a little easier to read what's going on. And then right below that, let's go ahead and do an echo. I'm going to do my echo tag. I'm going to do basically the same thing we've done in the previous exercise with the pre-tags. So we can actually see this set up the way it's normally displayed. Then I'm going to do an echo, print R. And inside there, I'm going to put my numbers array. And that with a semicolon. And then I'm going to echo the closing tag for my pre-tag. And this is just a pre-formatting tag in HTML. If you're familiar with HTML, with I'm assuming you should be, since you're studying PHP, that just is a pre-formatting tag in HTML, and it allows me to see the way that the actual array is formatted. So let's go ahead and do a save as, or save all, actually. Let's refresh our browser window, and you'll see now that the associative array, I've actually assigned the values based on, here's the key, there's the value. Key value, and you'll see now that I've got 1 equal 1, 2 equal 2. So I've taken my associative array and I've made a key value pair. I'm not quite certain where that 1 is coming from. It's inside my tags. I'm not quite certain where. Alright, I just actually retyped the name of that variable, numbers, and it corrected itself. I'm not quite certain why that 1 was appearing there, but it's no longer there. But now you can see how we set up an associative array. We assign the key and then assign that using the equal greater than sign to the value. And that's how we set them up as we build our associative arrays inside of PHP. We're going to do a couple more demonstrations, but I just wanted you to see by using the pre-tags, I get to print out exactly what that array looks like inside of our code. Alright, so let's do another demonstration of an associative array in PHP. I'm going to go ahead and take my file, do a save as. Again, I don't want to overwrite these, that's why I'm saving these under new names. I'm going to save this as arrays_3.php. I'm going to go ahead and pull all of our information out here. I'm going to change this by H4, just associative array. This is actually how I normally set those up when I set them up myself. I don't use the short syntax very often because it's kind of difficult to look at it real quick and see what's in it. So what I normally do when I'm setting them up myself, I'm going to go ahead and copy this from my text file so you don't have to watch me type it. Let me paste this in. Now let me go clean up the formatting and then we'll talk about how I set this up. What I've done is, remember, white space is ignored, both in HTML and PHP. So I've set up my users array, and then equals, I've got my opening square brace, and then I start walking down my key for first name, and then the value. Key for last name, then the value. Key for age and the value. And the reason, what I want you to understand here is, one, I've mixed our data types. All of my keys are strings, but the values themselves are both strings and numeric data, and that's how they can be. An array can store any type of value that we can store in PHP. So I've actually generated this array now called users, and it's got a first name, a last name, age, email, city, level, access. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Let's go in and load that arrays_3.php. And you'll notice we see nothing on our screen because we haven't really brought it out yet. Let's use that same way that we did it before with our pre-tags. I'm going to come right down below where I generate the array and go ahead and paste in my echoes. So now I'm going to echo the pre-tag. I'm going to print out my users array. I'm using the print_r function, and then I'm going to close the pre-tag so you can see it on the screen or inside our browser window. Let's go ahead and save those changes, refresh our browser, and that's actually what our array looks like. I've got a first name, a last name, an age, an email, and I'm hoping by using this as an example, you're getting an idea of how we actually use these types of arrays inside of our programming. because I mean I can actually use, by referring to that key, I can bring out a value. And I actually intentionally put a mistake in this array because I want to show you something that you need to pay attention to when you're actually doing this for yourself. Let's go ahead and do an echo statement. I'm going to echo a break tag so I can have a break or line break between what I'm getting ready to do. Got to remember to put that in quotation marks or it's not going to work. Close that one out. And now what I want to do is I want to echo. And again, I want to go into my users array. So I'm going to say users. And then inside my square brackets, I want to echo the last name. And I want to see if you can catch the mistake that I've made here. I'm going to go ahead and save those changes and echo the last name to my screen. This is a mistake that most people get caught on quite a bit. When I refresh the browser window, you notice I've got an undefined index last name in my array. And if you look, well, I actually have a last name field. Why isn't it coming out? Spaces are important inside these names. You notice I have an extra blank space there at the end of the last name. If I put that space there, save the change, I'll be able to see that last name. It will appear because now my value, my key, exactly matches the key inside the array. You got to be very careful with spaces after these keys. And the same thing with the values. An extra space in the value can do the same thing. So if I save that change now, and I come back down and I echo the last name correctly, where there's no spaces in the last name, save that, refresh my browser window, and I still see that last name as Smith. But you'll notice my bracket moved in that one space because that actual empty space was there. So again, that's how we set up an associative array. This is much more realistic as to how we use them in our programming, where we actually set up a user, we'll set up an array with the user's variables. When we get into the next part of the arrays where I start doing the multi-dimensional arrays, you'll see where I'll actually set up one array with the names and then an array inside that array with all this data. And usually I'll trigger that first array by user IDs. But anyway, I hope you got a good understanding of how associative arrays work. We went through the index arrays, we went through the associative arrays, and in the next part of the series, and I'm actually going to end this tutorial, and we'll do part 2 in arrays, we're actually going to do multi-dimensional arrays and go through how we use those inside of our PHP programming. Hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.